top 8 run here. Looking a little bit more formal today. Button down, but not too formal. A couple of the buttons undone. It's a good look.
Cedric on the play. We'll start with Foundry Street Denizen. We saw him do this last time on camera. Never was able to pump the guy on turn 2. Just a little 1-1, but that was good enough.
Cedric's been complaining that he's never had the Atarka Red nut draw so far this tournament. He's played a 1 drop on turn 1 and nothing on turn 2 quite a bit. Looks like it's going to be a little bit different this time.
Okay, nut draw engaged. Just 2 Monastery Swift Spears, 5 damage screaming across Roy's at 15 on turn 2.
Roy better have a carry added. That's all I got to say.
I mean, there are draws. You know, you follow this up with something like Atarka's command, and it almost doesn't matter what Roy's doing. He'll play Rattleclaw Mystic. It's not a carry added, but it may be worth a trade. Unfortunately, it'll probably be a trade with Foundry Street Denizen, but a trade nonetheless.
Trading with this deck does not feel good because
you paid 2 for your card. Cedric paid 1.
And Roy's card also costs, I don't know, like $5 or $6. Like there's the monetary exchanges too. Just none of this feels good.
And Cedric, he'll go ahead and wild slash away the Rattleclaw Mystic, prowess his guys, swing in. This is for 5 more. And he'll wild slash Roy again just to the face. That's a 4 damage spell, so that's 9. Roy's down to 6.
Seen a lot of turn 4 kills on camera today. Might see another one here.
And it's not going to be good enough. Can he stay alive? He's certainly getting blitzed. Cedric didn't have a 3rd land, but may not need one.
They will still be able to buy our magic cards, but they will only be able
Play a 3rd land and he'll pass the turn.
Thank you.
Ooh, combo
And
deck.
Dragon Fodder, that's going to prowess the Monist, the Swift Spears, pump the Denizen, and we're on to game 2.
And that,
Well,
just like that.
Said he didn't get the nut draws. That's one of the ones that just runs people out of that gate.
That counts as a nut draw, what Cedric just got. He got one of the good ones. I'm sure he's going to complain that he didn't have green mana, but he had one of the good draws.
Did he have an Atarka's command?
I don't know. We don't
Didn't
know.
matter.
I'm just saying, it wasn't perfect. Maybe if there was a Mana Confluence rolled in there, then it would actually be perfect. But as it stands, Cedric Phillips quickly up a game.
Yeah, cool. 48 minutes left in the round. Cedric 1-0. One thing we've been announcing is the invitationals for the remainder of the year. We now have our entire year schedule if you're looking to play in some upcoming opens. We have their winter schedule. Season 4 has been announced. This is starting in September through December. It starts with the Modern Open in Cincinnati, a Standard Open in Worcester. Then we move west, Standard in Milwaukee, and a Standard Open in Indianapolis.
After that, we're heading over to Atlanta for a Standard Open Series. 2 weeks after that, St. Louis for Legacy. A Modern Open Series in Dallas. We head back to Philadelphia November 7th and 8th for a Standard Open Series event. Then a Seal Grand Prix in Atlanta, Georgia. We go back to New Jersey for a Legacy Open Series. We return to Denver for the first time in several years at the beginning of December. Then the Season 4 Invitational with Standard and Modern as the invitational formats. And a Standard Open Series event December 11th through 13th. And that takes us to the end of the year Players Championship in Roanoke, Virginia, towards the end of the year, December 19th and 20th.
And we're back here for game 2. All right, let's look at some of the sideboard options. I mean, there's a lot of time here. Roy Yang. Gonna need anything and everything that costs small amounts of mana. We have a Hornet Nest, 2 Arc Lightnings, 2 Anger of the Gods, Roast, 2 Roast. Those are all cheap cards. Probably uses all of them here. Anything else you see you'd like, though?
Hornet Nest, I like. And I like bringing in the Dragon Lord Jamoka as well. I think that's if you're going to play with some 6-mana cards or some more expensive cards, I think he's much better served with something like Dragon Lord Jamoka, which is very likely to win the game on its own, compared to something like Ajani or Elspeth.
And over on Cedric's side, carry-added decks are things he likes to play against. His main deck's set up very well for it. Now, he should expect some number of Arc Lightning and Anger of the Gods coming in. Does that change how he approaches the match?
A little bit. He's got 4 copies of Eidolon of the Great Revel, 4 copies of Roast, 2 Hall of Triumph, 2 Goblin Routemaster, a Destructive Revelry, a Scouring Sands, and a Goblin Heel Cutter. I think he's going to bring in the Hall of Triumphs here to give himself a little bit more staying power. Also, the game's likely to slow down. Hall of Triumph's just a high-impact card. I think the 4 copies of Roast are likely to come in to kill Whisperwood Elemental, Courser Krufix, and so forth. I think the 1 copy of Goblin Heel Cutter is a nice addition, too, because Roy trying to block with some expensive cards, and Goblin Heel Cutter is nice in that matchup.
So I'm really interested about Hall of Triumph. So this is like you were talking about it before. It's a card that has seen a lot of play in Atarka Red sideboards. Why is it? It's not a card that people main deck, but you're saying it is very powerful. So I see how it's good against Arc Lightning. That much makes sense. It protects it, makes Arc Lightning into a 1-for-1. But how do you know when you want Hall of Triumph and when you don't want Hall of Triumph?
So Hall of Triumph is among the best cards, if not the best card in the mirror match, because there's just a lot of there's the same creatures floating around, and they're all 1/1s and 1/2s and so forth. So making yours essentially twice as large is a pretty big trump in the mirror match. I also think when you're playing against people whose plan against you is to block rather than kill everything, Hall of Triumph is pretty potent there. Roy's doing a mixture of those two things, but at the end of the day, his deck's more about blocking in this matchup than it is about killing everything. And Hall of Triumph's an effective card when your opponent's trying to block.
Puts more damage through.
But I think it's mostly as a mirror breaker. When you're both casting Dragon Potters and Hordeling Outbursts, Hall of Triumph's a very significant card.
Players getting ready for game 2. Here, expecting some light sideboarding on each side. Now, against draws like that, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of defense that Roy has. He kind of needs to hope that Cedric doesn't do that again.
Well, post-board, you see 2 copies of Feroz, so he's got some more cheap removal. 2 copies of Anger of the Gods and 2 copies of Arc Lightning, so he's got some pretty big trumps and catch-up cards if he falls behind. There's going to be a percentage of Cedric's draws that really struggle with Hornet Nest. There's no copies of Frenzy Goblin in his list, and only 1 copy of Goblin Heel Cutter. So if that 1 copy of Hornet Nest shows up, Cedric is likely to struggle with it. It just does a lot against beatdown decks. So Roy's sideboard cards definitely matter. They do make his deck much cheaper, interact much faster, and give him some ability to catch up, all of which he's lacking in game 1. But there's still a lot of pressure on him to find those cards very quickly because Cedric's not going to give him a lot of time to find them.
And so Roy also has an interesting card he could board in here. He has a copy of Hidden Dragon Slayer. While there's nothing to slay in this matchup, it is a 2/1 lifelink for 2. Maybe he could do a lot worse than that, especially when you're looking at cards like Mastery of the Unseen.
Potentially. I mean, with on the play, I think there's a chance that Mastery of the Unseen could be reasonable, especially if Roy has his Caryatid. That is a path to victory onto its own against Cedric. So he's able to block early. Mastery of the Unseen can be really powerful. There's 2 copies in the main deck. I don't think I would want to cut them all together. I could see going down to 1. Hidden Dragon Slayer against a deck with Wild Slash and a lot of cheap removal. I don't know. That feels like the type of thing where on the play I would want Mastery, and maybe on the draw where I just need to speed things up a little bit with my ability to interact, I would want the Hidden Dragon Slayer.
Well, Roy's going to be on the play this game. Also, it looks like he'll be on a mulligan again.
But same deal as before. Roy can afford a mulligan because he has a lot of implied card advantage in the matchup, and it's just an issue of him getting to his powerful stuff. So it is not one of those Thoughtseize counterspell type of matchups where having to mulligan and being down a card really matters. You'd prefer not to mulligan, but this is the kind of matchup where, players are likely to die with cards in their hand.
So some updates from around the tournament. At the top of the standings, we have 4 players at X1 and 1. Chris Morris-Lent on Sultai Reanimator. Nick Verral, we had him go 8-1 on camera yesterday. He's playing Obs on aggro. So they're the only players at X1 and 1. And interestingly enough, there's only 2 players at X and 2 as well. Those are Steven Gerdner, saw him, he was our 9-0, the mono green player, and Matt Osborne Koch playing Obs on midrange.
And that was actually one of our mono green players. One of the 2 losses was to Osborne Koch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was defeated by Osborne Koch the first round of today.
Yes. Dem Protector and removal spells were a little bit too much for the mono green aggro deck to overcome.
Some of the other players from yesterday still putting up really good results. If you look at players still in the tournament, Greg Peliquin, currently at X and 3, he is still fighting. Nick Peternell, we had him in the sideboard with blue-green devotion, still live here at X and 3.
And this is a function of having a relatively small tournament. Is we've gotten to see a lot of these decks on camera, just as a function of a lot of these players knocking each other out, and there not being a lot of premium records as we get later in the tournament. So all these people that you're mentioning, we've gotten to see at least once.
And Roy taking another mulligan here.
Cedric on 6 cards, seems to be happy with his 6.
I know I've said this before. Because, first of all, Cedric's on 6 cards, and Roy is playing a deck like a Courser of Krufix deck, even on a 5-card hand, because he's on the play, there certainly are situations where Roy Yang could be just fine here.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the good cards that he has in this deck are worth several cards out of Cedric's deck. Sylvan Caryatid, Courser of Krufix, Anger of the Gods, Hornet Nest. There's some big catch-up cards in Roy's deck.
Not to mention on 6 cards with a deck like Atarka Red, sometimes you do have to keep speculative hands, and those hands do have the potential to fall flat.
Yeah, sometimes you start looking at hands like 3 lands, Foundry Street Denizen, Wild Slash, Lightning Strike, and say, okay, whatever, I kind of got to keep this sort of hand and hope to draw well after the fact. And Roy, with 1 good blocker, can easily beat a hand like that.
Yeah, you can keep that hand is definitely a keepable hand. It's not great. And if your top first 3 draws that roll off are more lands and maybe another Wild Slash, the hand doesn't beat much of anything.
Yeah. Although it looks like Roy is not thrilled about his 5, but looks to be happy enough.
Well, it has a land, and that land is a temple. That's a pretty big incentive. If he has a card like Courser, that would make him keep it. He'll scry to the bottom. For Cedric, it's Monastery Swiftspear for 1, Roy down to 19. We'll see, did Roy keep a hand with not enough lands, with too many lands? Maybe not enough. He does have Rattleclaw Mystic in his hand. It looked like that, and he'll get that on turn 2. His draw was Temple of Plenty, so his hand is functional.
Yeah, and I think he has Anger of the Gods in his hand. So this is a really strong 5-card hand here for Roy.
Interesting. So yeah, he's doing that. Doesn't mean he has to play Rattleclaw Mystic into Anger of the Gods. You see Cedric here with a turn 2 Dragon Fodder. That'll prowess the Swiftspear into a 2/3. He'll attack Roy down to 17. How much damage can Roy take before he'd have to pull the trigger on Anger? Obviously doesn't want to kill his own Rattleclaw, but...
But the Rattleclaw here may be a blessing in disguise if it does conceal the fact that Roy has Anger of the Gods and may compel Cedric to just play out his entire hand. Yeah. And then Anger of the Gods might get everything Cedric has.
And this is the card that Roy wanted on his Mull to 5. Turn 3, he played copy of Courser of Kruphix.
I mean, with Cedric on a 6-card hand and Roy mulliganing to 5, I think from this position, knowing that Roy has Anger of the Gods in hand, he's the favorite to win this game.
Yeah. Courser, such a great card against Atarka Red. It's a sizable blocker. He can Anger of the Gods through it. It's going to gain him life and create card advantage. It's what he wants to be doing here.
Post-board, Cedric's a little bit better equipped to handle this card. He does have 4 copies of Roast, so he has more kill spells for it on top of Stoke the Flames. But if he doesn't have an answer to this, he's just going to have to drop more stuff on the board, and then Anger of the Gods could get everything Cedric has left.
And Cedric knows it, that this is a pretty decent threat his opponent has presented.
If Cedric has a Roast or a Stoke the Flames, he's probably fine because he's going to spend his turn getting rid of Courser or Kruphix most likely. If he does not, he can't really attack until he puts more stuff on the table. And that is really bad news for Cedric.
Looking through his hand, see a copy of Atarka's Command and Lightning Strike. He'll Pain here. And he'll just make another Dragon Fodder that'll prowess the Swiftspear. That's got to be a good one for Roy.
Yeah, that's the... I mean, Roy couldn't be happier with that.
Except the Dragon Fodder was to convoke Stoke the Flames. So that's going to kill the Courser. Swiftspear prowesses again, hits for 3. Roy down to 15. He'll draw Windswept Heath. This does open Cedric up to Anger of the Gods, but because Courser's off the board, Roy's not pulling away when he does it.
Yeah.
And regardless, he's just going to play Stormbreath Dragon as a blocker and say go.
And Cedric can't roast this, so this might compel even more plays from Cedric to tap out. Now, the risk here from Roy is if Cedric has a Atarka's Command, this is a lot of damage coming across.
And I believe Cedric does.
Roy may have been better served just casting Anger last turn because Atarka's Command is going to deal a bunch of damage, and even if Roy untaps and sweeps up Cedric's entire board, he might just take too much damage on this swing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the danger was he didn't want to Anger of the Gods because then he wouldn't have the mana for Stormbreath Dragon. You're right, though. Stormbreath's going to block Swiftspear. Atarka's Command is going to be cast. It's going to pump the team. 3 Roy. Prowess the Monastery Swiftspear. So Swiftspear will still be a 3/4. It'll still die to not even. I was going to say it was going to die to Stormbreath Dragon, but 5 damage to the face off burn spells, and an additional 8 damage for Roy dealt to Roy. That's taking 13 that turn.
Yeah, that was just a whole bunch of damage there, and I think
down to 2. And I think the Anger may have been a Stormbreath. I don't know if he actually has this here, but I think it was Stormbreath Dragon. And there's the swing from Cedric. He'll block, and you have it. Cedric Phillips 2-0 defeats Roy Yang, and he stays at 3 losses. That is his 7th win in a row. Now 1 round from top 8.
Yeah. And then you can see in that game how important it is for Roy to have some of his best cards there. Even his cards like Stormbreath Dragon, when he gets to them, aren't necessarily going to be good enough. Now, Roy mulligan, he tried to find a functional hand there, and it looked pretty good for him for a while there, but without a way to actually contain Cedric's board, it was just too much damage from Cedric too fast.
For a 5-card hand, his hand was pretty great.